there's many ways to develop the strength to overcome a limitation. So let's imagine your ability to lift weights. Okay, so you try to lift a certain amount, but you can't lift it. You find out that your technique is wrong, and so you change your technique, and you can actually lift more. Or you try to play golf. Golfing is an interesting thing. I like to play golf. I don't go out enough. But you try to play golf, and you find out that your grip is off, and then you have to rearrange your grip and get a new grip, and then your grip affects your swing and your connection to the ball. And so when you find that you are having a limitation in connection, then you change your technique. And the reason I wanted to start off with calculators today is because when you're dealing with limitations, most people go by the feeling of it rather than the actual calculations of it. A person who feels limited tells themselves they're limited because they have a certain feeling, but they don't actually. Hey there, I'm glad you guys are tapping in. Hey Nick, good to see you. Sabrina, good to see you. And my lovely wife, good to see you. It's interesting with the limitation is that you have this, you have the feeling of it. And most people, we get the feeling of being limited before we actually know why we're limited, or before we actually know what the limitation is. And so we immediately go, I feel limited, I'm being resisted, I'm feeling restriction. And so that feeling of restriction, my son Joseph is texting me right now. We feel that restriction in that limitation. And then as we have this limitation, we don't actually sit down and just begin to calculate what is it that I'm hitting, and what's going to change this limit. So if you don't actually give yourself the proper calculations, analysis, and then you'll never know how to actually approach it and break it. Now, the person that you go to a coach, you go to a success coach, you go to a golf coach, you go to a workout coach. Those coaches have developed strategies and technologies and that know how to break through. They know how to break through the limits, even though themselves they may have never bench pressed 200, 400 themselves, but they know how to give you the techniques to get to that place and break through. So that means there's an analytical aspect to limit breaking that's more than just brute strength. And so if we would learn and understand that there are calculations that must be a part of the equation. If you don't know what your limit is, and you don't know what it's going to take to break your limit, then you haven't calculated it, and you haven't really analyzed it. And the more and more I develop in business and in helping people, the more I realize I need to be very accurate in everything. It's like you can't just brush stroke things. You can't just say, well, maybe it's this. Now, do you see the people that are succeeding, the people that are achieving, the people that are actually overcoming? Those people are choosing to overcome because they're actually sitting down and they're having a follow through on and a follow up and a look at what they have done and what they've achieved, and they're actually asking themselves, what can I do differently here? And then they're equating that difference, and they're actually then putting in place the different things that are needed to make that happen. So think about this. When I was in school, I wasn't the best student. Now, it wasn't because I wasn't the brightest. It wasn't because I didn't have the kind of insight and understanding, and I was, just ignorant or stupid. It literally came down to this one thing. I remember evaluating, why are these guys better at this than I am? Why are they better? I'm in the sun, so I'm going to be touching my brow a little bit. Why are they better at school and getting grades than I am? And after evaluating, I realized something is that they would listen to instruction. I knew they weren't brighter than me. I just felt like I was very smart, and that's probably the issues. When you feel like you're very smart, you probably try to find ways to get around things. And so, but they would sit there and they would listen to the instruction. They would read the instructions. Then they would go back and make sure that they have the right instructions from the teacher. And when the teacher confirmed the instruction, then they would go and do the assignment. Now, once they have the complete, accurate description of what the instruction is, what that is, that there, and it's completely calculated. Now, instructions are wonderful because instructions tell you exactly how to get things done. There's no need to modify it. There's no need to adjust it. You don't need to be stronger than someone else. There was no one in the room that needed to be smarter than anyone else. What it came down to is one person was calculated enough to say, if that's what the teacher says I need to do, I don't need to understand it. I don't need to know it. I don't need to actually be brighter than the teacher. I just need to go and do the teacher's assignment. I need to get it done. And that's what caused them to have better grades. Now, when I decided to start being a person who followed instructions, it had literally nothing to do with school. It had to do with success. My desire for success caused me to be more accurate in my evaluation. I wanted to know, why wasn't I receiving? Why wasn't I achieving? Why wasn't I increasing? And the more I actually asked that question, the more I analyzed what is the real lid. What is the real limitation? Am I limited? Is it because I'm not smart enough? Is it because of my height? Is it because of my weight? Is it because of my color? And it's easy to get caught into those things. Well, I'm a man. Well, I'm black. I'm this. You can get caught up in all these things and create a limitation in your mind that literally will continue to reinforce itself if you don't move forward. If you don't just say, well, those limits can't be mine. And if those are the limits, then what I've got to do is I've got to do something that's called green eggs and ham, and we'll talk about that in the future. Or I've got to double down on it. And double down is like daily doubles in football. When you get done with you get finished with the summer, or you're close in the summer, you've been eating from all winter, and you got to get ready for the season. First thing the coach does is he asks you to come twice daily, to prepare for the season. And the part of that coming twice daily to prepare for the season is you work out in the morning, you work out in the evening, because you're breaking through something, you're breaking through a lid. You're giving that limitation energy that you would give to something else. And I think that's another part of calculations, that most people don't know how to give the limitation that the extra energy it needs, and they spend their time and they continue to give the energy that is going in places that doesn't bring increase to them. They continue to give that energy out that way. And so you want to just take away from other energies, and you want to give yourself to good energy. You want to put yourself into that. Now that's just the first initial. And I have more time that I can talk to you about just breaking that lid, but you have to change the limiter, and the limiter is usually mental, and it's mental because you're just general stroking it. You're not actually looking at it and going, literally, if I just put 5 more minutes into this, I will break my limit. Or, when I want to get fit and I want to go to my next level, so I literally just stop eating an extra 100 calories, then I'll break that lid. I'll break this limitation. So the limitation is usually not that much further than what you're actually outputting, but you have to calculate it enough to really know, what do I need to add to this in order to make this happen, in order to break through the limitation. So I see we see people moving in and off, and I just don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do want to give you that. The other thing is the caterpillar. Now, I just spend a lot of time researching caterpillar. I'm not going to tell you everything I've learned about caterpillars, but caterpillars, moths, anything that go from they come from an egg. They spend part of their life in a larva state, like a caterpillar. They spend that time eating, devouring. I mean, we see a caterpillar and go, oh, look at this caterpillar, but we don't really see, well, that's just a larva of a butterfly, or it's just the beginning of something. It's not the end of something. And so sometimes we look at ourselves and we go, wow, look at this, and we don't realize that that's just the beginning of us. That's not the end of us. That's not all that we are. And we look at a caterpillar. I used to play with caterpillars out here. I'm looking for caterpillars now because this is a good season for caterpillars, probably here in the Northwest. And I used to play with them, let them crawl, and I literally, when I was young, thought that this was all they were. This is all that it was going to be. As of course you go in school, you realize that caterpillars, one day after eating and devouring, they climb onto a branch and they start to weave a silk casing around themselves, and then they go inside and they come out to be a butterfly. Now, no one ever told me what actually happens when they get into that they don't just come out to be a butterfly. What happens is they actually digest themselves in that sac, and they become liquid. They call it a soup. They call it a pupa soup, not pupa soup, but a pupa soup. And that soup, it dissolves everything that they are, every part of them, all of it, except for these these little discs, and these little discs are called imaginal discs. Imaginal discs are like, they would be like hard drives or like little discs that save images that are placed into the caterpillar before the caterpillar was actually hatched from the egg. So imagine this: in the egg, there's little discs called imaginal discs that are being implanted in the caterpillar that are associated to what it's going to look like when it's an adult. It's carrying around these imaginal discs, but it's not the fullness of what it is. It has the potential of it, and it's written in its code, and it's written in its DNA. I'm really excited about this. I thought, my goodness, we are all born with an internal imagination of who we could be and what we could be, but what limits us is we get stuck looking at what we are currently. And we don't allow going through the liquefying process where we have to actually maybe cocoon ourselves for a moment, be liquefied, almost feel like we are nothing, like everything we've achieved and all that season of eating and devouring and learning is nothing. And then all of a sudden it goes in there, and then we find ourselves in this state of being liquefied, and like everything is just running through my fingers. Nothing is actually settled. Nothing seems like it's achieving. And we don't know how to handle those seasons. We don't know how to handle those times. So we end up diffusing our potential of what everything that was. All that time as a caterpillar was literally for one reason alone. And that's for me to eat, to learn, to grow, to develop, to increase, to study, to read, to preach, to proclaim, to talk out. All of that is for just constant content and confirmation and information going in and going out, and just sharing and learning. It's all there. But none of that is really what you're going to be developed into. That's actually just fuel, so that when it's time, that imaginal disc that has been written in you when you were a little egg, that imaginal disc, and every part of that little caterpillar that's going to turn into a butterfly or a moth, every disc has a specific assignment. So in this thing, where in the chrysalis, when it's in that chrysalis, it's dissolving and digesting itself, and all that it was before is just disappearing. Now, what is the only thing that's left there is soup, this protein, the soup that's there, and then these imaginal discs. And so the wings have an imaginal disc. They didn't have wings before it went in there, but it had the memory or the imagination of a disc, the imaginal disc, the imagination of a wing. So the wing was divinely implanted in that little caterpillar before it ever knew it could become. And so it doesn't actually think about it. It actually just eats, devours, and then as time goes, it becomes that, and it allows that to grow out. Now, this is important, that there's one for the disc, there's one for the legs, there's a disc for the eye, there's the disc for the wings, there's a disc for the feet, there's a disc for every part that the mature adult moth is going to need. Even when it was in the egg, there's imagination for it, there was an image for it, there was an idea about it. And so what you're going through today, what you're breaking through, the limits you're breaking through today, is not, don't look at what you are today, because you may actually look like a little larva, a little worm, a little something that hasn't actually developed into what it, but there's something written in you that is supposed to encourage you, that's supposed to help you, that's supposed to create a bigger imagination. Don't get stuck in what you are today. Don't get stuck in your limitations. Don't get stuck in what's not happening. Don't get stuck in the fact that you aren't tall enough. Don't get stuck in the fact that you have a hard time. You have a thyroid issue and you can't lose the weight. Don't get stuck in any of that, because you can shift that, because written inside of you is something that tells you you're better than the limits that you're having right now, the limits that you're experiencing. Don't get stuck in your color. Don't get stuck in any of this. Don't get locked into those limits that society wants you to get locked into, because you will actually write yourself away or out of that imaginal code, that imaginal disc that's actually been planted in you when you were just a little tiny egg, just like that caterpillar. Something was divinely implanted in you before you even started this life, and that's what you're going after. What's the difference The difference is yes, you may feel like a worm, but that's okay. You may feel like a mess, just like that little caterpillar in that cocoon. You may feel like a mess, but can I tell you, none of that matters. What matters is there's something written inside of you that tells you there's more. There's something written inside of you that tells you there's better. There's something written inside of you that says this is not the end of me. This is the beginning of me. I may be getting just falling apart right today, falling apart right now, but something inside of me tells me the best is yet to come. Hopefully that's encouraging. What do calculators and caterpillars have to do with lids? Is they both help you overcome limitations. Let me just summarize here. Calculate what you're dealing with, know exactly what that lid is, calculate and strategize and write down the numbers and keep track of it, and be critical and be systematic and let other people be critical, because that's what helps you understand what your lid is. Once you understand it, then you can actually count your way out of it. Number two, the caterpillar goes through so many different morphs and adjustments and changes, and in it, from the beginning of its creation, was something that tells it, don't stop growing now, don't stop learning now, don't get stuck here, go to your next level. Hopefully this was encouraging. Thank you for walking with me. I have no idea what time it is. I didn't carry my watch and it doesn't show me here, so if I took a little bit longer, sorry about that, but I hope you are encouraged. Continue to break through barriers, continue to bust through limitations. You are not limited unless you think you are. We'll see you next time.